Hey neighbor, thanks for stopping by for another dose of 7 on Sunday. It's like pouring a little packet of ARTV in your cup every week and boom, down the hatch, another week of music is in the books. I hope you're doing well during these crazy times. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Today's episode is what I'd like to think of as a loose sequel, a companion piece, if you will, to the video I made about bands who never quite topped their brilliant debut album. Once again, we're jumping into the world of debuts, but this time we're throwing the car in reverse since I'm laying down the hammer on 7 great bands whose debut albums were either not good, straight up bad, or else forgettable compared to the rest of their discography. I'm sure it goes without saying, but on their own, these records might not sound so bad from an objective point of view if you do choose to listen. The separating factor is that these groups went on to reach such great heights, music that some consider to be among the all-time greats, yet at the end of the rainbow, there's a dud that failed to ignite the airwaves rather than a pot of gold. I'll do my best to explain why I picked each of these along with more details on how the band in question broke free of these lackluster freshman sets. Some of these albums I seriously do hate, yet some are okay if I pretend they were made by a different band in an alternate world. Feel free to hit the comment section with any and all thoughts, whether you agree, disagree, and while you're down there perusing, take a second to like the video and ring the bell along with your subscription so you get notified when I upload. Rather than come out guns blazing against an album I loathe, I put the heavy metal band Avenged Sevenfold first, with their cheaply made and ultimately dated debuts sounding the 7th trumpet. Far be it for me to come down too harshly on this album, despite the fact that some of the aspects do make me cringe all these years later, but they were just starting to put the pieces and figure out their lineup, so it makes sense that they wouldn't put out pure gold. M. Shadows had yet to undergo his vocal training, which took place before the recording of their 3rd album, City of Evil, so we got lots of chaotic yells and screams that don't particularly sound good or cutthroat, more just overcompressed and plagued with problems. If there's such a thing as background music in the world of metal, their Book of Revelation debut is the very definition of that. There's very little chemistry that feels natural outside of some of the more impressive cuts like We Come Out at Night. Imagine a band just playing and standing there with very little emotion or expression behind it. That's sounding the 7th trumpet in a nutshell, and for some, I guess that's enough. They needed to do more to prove why they had the goods to put them on the map forever. And as that subtle pun would imply, they took a huge sonic leap forward with their metalcore engulfed Waking the Fallen in 2003. That's still a great record that mostly holds its weight in a title fight, but even still, that was just the beginning. To clarify this one's inclusion right out of the gate, the self-titled Jimmy Eat World release is objectively not a bad album. It's well played with its crunching punk sound, but I include it because it wasn't truly something that felt like Jimmy Eat World. It's long since been out of print, you're not gonna find this thing on streaming services, and the band don't really acknowledge the release very often, and to me, it sounds like a really strong imitation of 90s punk bands like Jawbreaker or even Green Day. On paper, that might sound really interesting, and I suggest taking to YouTube to hear the album for yourself just so you actually have some context. You'll hear a very different band than the Jimmy Eat World we know today. A band that hadn't yet found their emo stride, as Jim Adkins shared some of the lead vocal duties with guitarist Tom Linton on this debut, and Static Prevails. The main reason I don't really care for the self-titled album, outside of the plethora of obvious influences from other bands, has to do with the forced feelings I get from the vocal performances. Jim Adkins has one of the most distinct, instantly recognizable voices in the world of rock music, but he didn't eclipse the hurdles on album 1, which ran itself into the ground by the time all was said and done. Just look at what this band went on to be. Clarity is one of the best emo albums ever made. Bleed American defined a generation of fans at the turn of the century with its blistering combo of power pop and emo, and even their late 2010s works, Integrity Blues and The Glorious Surviving, proved why they're one of the only thriving 90 bands that never sold out, never compromised, never surrendered. They just keep churning to the beat of the music, and as a result, they've maintained a devoted fan base that might just eat me alive for having the audacity to dismiss their debut, but it's fine. I appreciate the strong ties that a lot of people have to that record, and the extremely Sunny Day Real Estate influenced follow-up Static Prevails, which, to be honest, I really can't stomach that often either, since it literally sounds way too much like Sunny Day.
He answered my prayer, and at the sight of him I fell to my knees. and until I run into that faithful trip.
I'd imagine some viewers are already taking issue with Reliant K being called a great band for the sake of this video's title. I'll admit it's a little bit of a reach, even though I do think that they made some great albums, including Forgetting Not Slowed Down and Air for Free. Even if you don't agree and think those records are all terrible, can we at least all agree that their debut affair was trash? Because it's trash! Mom, can we please have Blink-182? We have Blink-182 at home. Reliant K brought pop-punk to religious households all throughout the 2000s with their quirky Jesus-referencing antics. And at the starting line of their career, we have one of the most dated-sounding albums I've ever had the displeasure of sitting through. It's tacky. It's like wearing a clown costume to a funeral for your own career and not being self-aware enough to know that this is a problem. I consider to be their definitive work, one that blended a bit of humor, tons of strong hooks, and ties to God and religion without being unbearably cheesy. That album actually means a lot to me, and believe it or not, I don't hate religious references in music, I'm just extremely picky about it being done right. And as Reliant K grew up and matured, Matt Thiessen developed a strong talent for songwriting, which is even more apparent on the brilliant Forgetting Not Slowed Down. Predictable pick is predictable, but is it really a list about bad debut albums from great bands if we're not talking about Pablo Honey? I think not, as it's pretty much mandatory given the growth Radiohead showed between this grungy beginning and the now classic sophomore effort, The Bends. Radiohead are one of the most innovative bands in the world of all time. Slap a gold medal on me, give me a perfect shooting star, I've made such a bold statement. But the reality of their inclusion here should be pretty obvious when you listen to Pablo Honey and then go hear, I don't know, literally anything else they've ever made. I love some of the other songs on here. Yes, that includes Creep, catch me singing my heart out in the shower to that classic 5 nights a week. But most of the other songs just drag and feel like an absolute bore, even though they aren't inherently awful. They just do little to move the needle one way or the other compared to their needle-destroying discography. Tom York had yet to fully realize his vocal capabilities, and the band just kinda seemed content to play homogenized riffs and settle into an all-too-familiar musical landscape. Those, along with several other factors, make for a pretty frustrating listen when you just sit there waiting for them to break out of this box of limitations, but they just never do it. I like it in the sense that it shows how far they've come and that any band can evolve light years ahead of their humble start, but past that, Pablo Honey is a bit of a snooze fest that's without a doubt their worst album. The virtually unrecognizable Anthony Kiedis led the charge for the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1983, matching the title of their debut album to the name of the band. Flea and Anthony are of course the only two consistent members throughout all timelines of the band's complex history, yet it all started so simple with a group of friends making noise, playing loud, and having fun. And doing drugs. Lots of drugs! My love for the Chili Peppers and everything from around Blood Sugar onwards isn't enough to miraculously make me fall in love with the first 3 records though, and that of course includes the incredibly agitating self-titled album. Anthony was like a madman behind the mic, spitting rhymes over Flea's nasty bass slaps. It's just one of those things that I can appreciate from a distance while wearing a hazmat suit because I'm scared I'm gonna get hurt. In the years that followed, they dropped the funk metal act in favor of smoother C's that blended their talents for a much better sound. Once drummer Chad Smith and guitarist John Frusciante joined up, we got literal magic, and when John returned again, we got a 3-album run from 1999 to 2006 that's among the best back-to-back-to-back combos ever delivered. Sometimes I just like to forget that the early days exist. I mean, I doubt bands like them or Pantera are entirely proud of the early moments that feel so vastly different compared to what the band went on to be, but at the same time, it's not worth disowning because they were young, dumb, and on the run to something much, much better. The English alt-rock band My Bloody Valentine may only have a few albums to their name, but the ones they do have influenced a generation of young bands, as they single-handedly defined the shoegaze genre on the back of Kevin Shields' glide guitar technique that so many bands, I mean everybody, was trying to emulate this in the 1990s. With 3 holy grail achievements in the indie sphere and beyond, what about their long-forgotten debut mini-album This Is Your Bloody Valentine that doesn't sound anything like the MBV we came to know and love? That was the group's first official release, and it played out more like a faux edgy goth rockabilly album with a large appetite for following another 80s band's footsteps, rather than the trailblazing that eventually became synonymous with their own band name. Shields' voice is hidden in backing frames as former member David Conway took the spotlight in those early days long before Belinda Butcher, a move that, well, if you're into that sort of thing, you might call it passable, but I'm eternally grateful he decided to leave the band to pursue his dream of being a writer. There were a lot of early career EPs and mini albums, and I know you might think I'm letting them off on a technicality since Isn't Anything was their official full-length debut, but the nearly 30-minute This Is Your Bloody Valentine released in 1985, a good 3 years before that entered the picture. I'm counting it because its burned out ideas and dead-end streets paved the way for a bigger, bolder, more experimental MBV that created some of the most unforgettable albums ever put to tape.
So I pay my peg leg. And I've been practicing my dance moves all year.
Sometimes I forget just how long the Wonder Years have been around. I like to pretend they only officially started when they signed to Hopeless Records in 2010, but alas, that's not true at all, and their debut album Get Stoked On It takes the cake as one of the worst starts to a great band ever, and nobody even talks about it. Perhaps you know this band for their distinctly mature lyrics about losing friends, or maybe their deceptively bright pop-punk instrumentals that lean more into alt-rock than they do any tropes of the other genre that became so quickly oversaturated in the modern wave of pop-punk bands. Take all of that knowledge and wipe it like a squeegee over a car windshield because we're starting from scratch all the way back in their cringeworthy Scene Kid days. It goes without saying that MySpace culture fueled the band's easycore addictions that were littered throughout every track on this piss-poor joke of an album, Get Stoked On It. Yet at the time, there were fans ready to gobble that shit up, and hell, I might catch some heat for daring to criticize the try-hard lyrics, wannabe angsty song titles that just make me want to vomit, and of course the keyboard player that literally wouldn't stop acting like it was always his time to shine. Oh hey, did someone call for me? I've got this great 1 synth tone and I'd like to play a variation of it on every single track on the album. I literally wrote them off for a long period of time because I knew them back in the MySpace days. I thought they were annoying then, and I guess I'd picked some of the weaker tracks from Suburbia and the Upsides to sample, since I wasn't fully won over until the undeniable Greatest Generation broke me down and made me a fan. Listen, if you like bro dudes doing gang vocal shouts like it's their religion, piercing keyboards tuned horribly high in the mix, and Dan Campbell singing like he's actively trying to dumb down his IQ by 30 points, then give it a go. I bet you'll find the album cover absolutely hysterical too. If none of that sounds appealing and you're a fan that adores their later records, steer clear because every song, including the token ballad, God knows they had to dump that on us, are a terrible product of a very different time. Now it's time for you to join the conversation. Tell me your thoughts on the bands I picked, and keep in mind that I absolutely am not calling all of these albums horrendous just because they're on the list. Some of them are, some of them aren't. I hope you enjoyed this one. It was a ton of work, so please leave a like on the video and share it out if you did. Subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on future episodes of SOS, and check out the links below if you want to support me on Patreon or follow my socials. Until next time, thanks for watching ARTV.